Welcome to What's in Store, the show where we cover hot topics at the cross-section of retail and real estate. I'm Karly Iacono, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Ressa. Chris, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Feeling good. Are you in the holiday spirit?
I am.
Nice.
I am. You?
Caroling, like what's been going on?
What's your favorite Christmas song?
Ooh, what's my favorite? I'm going to have to go rocking around the Christmas tree because I really don't like the sad ones.
Okay.
How about you?
I like a lot of different versions of Carol of the Bells.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yes. I even dig I've wanted to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
I haven't seen them. I like their version of it. So
I also like this group called Pentatonics, which is all vocal.
Huh.
They sound like instruments with their voices.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a lot of fun. So give that a listen.
I will.
We are coming off a hot ICSC New York.
Yes.
So we were both in the city for felt like about 3 weeks, but I think it was only
did.
2.5 days.
Yes, it was long.
11 Ubers later, right? We got through. It was crazy few days. So today we're going to take a few minutes and go through both of our takeaways from New York ICSC.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So what's your number one?
My number one is...
Or is this number three?
Yeah, it's in no particular order.
Okay.
I'm not ranking them.
I'm going to rank mine.
You're going to rank yours?
I am.
All right, good. Well,
Yes.
We'll just make this work then. On the spot, reorganization. Okay, my number one in no particular order is the creativity of deal making and business plans that I heard from investors. So I heard everything from someone converting, this was a really interesting one, a Rite Aid into a car wash without fully demising the building. So just building down the center so that they had noise control and it was easy to get approved through the town. From a use, they didn't need a variance. I have no idea how that penciled or what the numbers were. It was a passing conversation, but I thought that was fascinating.
That is.
So creative development and redevelopment is something that I heard a lot of and I think will be a focus for 25. And then it goes to the other side to like an investment grade single tenant business plan where you buy and hold. Maybe have investors, maybe it's a fund, but it's a belief in the long-term stability of net lease and investment grade tenants. So that's still happening. And then you have your high yield, tertiary, multi-tenant retail business plan, which is we believe in the growth of rents. We believe in local retail. It doesn't have to be national. And investors are excited about the yield that they can get in more tertiary assets. So it was just an amazing spread of ideas that people had with one theme that everyone is anxious to get deals done. We're all kind of tired in capital markets of the last 2 years and the sluggish activity. So it felt like there was more of a push to maybe move beyond a standard business plan and really, really get creative next year.
Okay. Everyone's predicting, do you think there's going to be this slew of inventory that comes online?
I don't think so. I think that's been filtering in at the end of 24. We have some deals we're launching in January just because it's not great to launch deals over the holidays, but that wasn't a 6-month wait period. It was just we're not launching anything in the next 2 weeks. So I think you'll see, as always, kind of a blip at the beginning of the year in January after the holidays. But I don't think the market has changed so significantly that people were waiting, for January. I don't think it's markedly different than November, for example.
Got it. Okay.
We'll see. That's an easy one to come back to and see if I'm right or not. But
okay.
We'll come back to.
Fair enough.
You want to jump in with your number three?
I'm going to go with my number three.
All right, let's go number three.
My number three is the 5-year plan. So when I spoke to a lot of retailers, I heard more than I usually do about over the next 5 years what their strategy is. And that was, to me, that was super interesting to hear because I heard it multiple times from multiple different retailers in multiple different sectors. And the reason it's interesting is, one, it's a pretty long view on the space, pretty bullish view on the space for the future. So that feels good that they're strategizing store expansion over that long of time. A lot of retailers kind of have an idea of how many stores based on current market conditions the United States can handle of their store. So if they're at 1,000 and they think there's room for 2,000 or whatever it might be. And I think it gives them potentially, there's a little bit of a shift of this, we're always going to be, especially the public companies, quarter by quarter, but it gives them a shift to say that, like, if there's something that's off in a quarter, or it gives them the opportunity to say, if there's something off in a quarter, that we're still on track with our 5-year plan and our 5-year strategy. Whether the street accepts that or not, if something goes awry, I don't know. But in general, I was really, really glad to hear all the strategy around a 5-year plan that people were attacking to, especially, and maybe it resonates so much with me is because as we were in COVID, like, it was hard to get your arms around, like, what are we going to do the next 5 years, right? We're trying to get to tomorrow. And so now I think people we're not only have we come out of that period of time, the dust is a bit settled. They have clear visibility on their consumer and their business to the future, and they're prepared to put 5-year plans in place. And that's really exciting to see.
Do you think that is partially driven by the fact that they couldn't open the stores they wanted to open the last 2 years? Is the 5-year plan, just to play devil's advocate, a way to tell investors, okay, we didn't meet the growth targets because we couldn't find the sites or whatever, capital markets weren't beneficial to us, but don't worry, we have a 5-year plan, we're still going to do it. So is it a way to kind of quell concerns over lack of performance, or is it really just that we have that much clarity in the market that we can look farther ahead?
I think we have as much clarity as we can. There's a lot of, we have more data than we ever had. So I think that's been helping them and able to get conviction around longer term plans. And retailers have always been longer term in nature, right? They're building a store and signing a 5, 10, 15, 20-year lease. So they're always thinking longer term. I think coming out of that period of time where it was really hard to get visibility around longer term, and that period of time being the COVID era, I'm not really sure to your question, because at the end of the day, a lot of retailers have hit growth plans. So maybe it could be we're seeing this, there's no end in sight to the lack of supply. It's hard to envision enough retailers could close for that to equalize out. It just wouldn't be there. And so to that end, maybe, but I think it's really more to do with, we're on this stable footing. We have more clarity. Now let's really drive this business home. We're on offense now.
And I think there's a big difference between stock market financial projections, right? Because I've seen some retailers pull guidance for, next year, beginning of the year, because earnings were a miss or there was some instability, but obviously not across the board. But that's different than what you're saying. You're saying a 5-year growth plan, a leasing plan, a business plan, which maybe doesn't always line up with Wall Street's financial projections. But that's good to hear that they're willing to have longer term conversations with landlords and really build that relationship, probably in an effort to secure more sites over the next few years.
For sure.
So still good news.
Yes.
Good news.
What's your number 2?
My number 2, in no particular order, is the use of retail space changing. And I thought this was an interesting one because some of the conversations were really unique this year, such as, have you thought about drone staging? And this seems kind of sci-fi, like, okay, and it's probably less, relevant. Well, maybe not for a single tenant, but actually could be relevant there as well. So not just do we have drones, but if we're going to do drone delivery, where do you load the drones? Where do you repair them? Where do you store them, right? How do we fit this new model into the site plan? Because apparently it's quite a lot of square footage that's required for things like drone staging.
So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about drone staging. And some of these far out things are tough to get your arms around, right? Like, I remember someone saying at a conference 7-8 years ago, if you're building shopping centers or building properties where people drive cars,
Right.
you're missing.
Right. I remember that too.
So that like hit home. I was like, holy cow! Like if you're building a parking lot that's set up for people to drive cars, then you're off. So I'm not. I think we're early in this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that would have to happen for it to really take flight. And
no pun intended.
No pun intended. And our industry is slow to adapt some of these things, right? Like I forget the numbers, but there's still a good portion of properties in America that aren't LED lit.
Right.
So now, you know what I mean? So now we're talking about like drone staging areas. I think it's interesting. I think it is where that's at scale. I don't know that we're close to that just yet.
I'll give you an easier one then. The elimination of parking requirements. So I heard that talked a lot, and certain municipalities across the country in different states are actually considering taking away all parking requirements in the zoning code, because the argument is certain retailers need very little parking, some need more, and that it should be site specific, not in the zoning code. So that's a change, right? When you're penciling a development or you're looking at a redevelopment, what use could fit there, that could be very different in the near term.
I love it. I think we're far out from that being wide scale based on this is a place I am in the weeds on. I'm in municipalities getting approvals all the time. This is far from happening at scale. There are certain municipalities who certainly are thinking through this to get more development in their area. But there's so many different municipalities that have so many different interests. I think to have that be the norm, I would say we're in the same timeline as drone staging areas.
Wow.
Yes.
That far off.
Yes.
I think parking changes are a little closer than widespread drones.
They both require the same thing.
A change in the use of space.
A change in regulation.
Yeah.
The moment that we can have, right, the technology's there for drones. The reality is that's not that hard of a staging area to build. At the end of the day, what we need is a change in regulation that we could have drones flying all over the place and delivering things without,
Yes.
Yeah. And I think what you're looking for from a parking requirement is the same, which is zoning to be changed widespread across the country. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of, municipalities, boards to get on board with doing that.
Here's why I love ICSC, though. It forces us, broker, landlord, investor, lender, to get out of our comfort zone of the way that we've always looked at retail.
For sure.
Right? And if we didn't have these huge meetups, we might never think differently. We'd say, well, this is too far away, or this is too hard or too big of a project, or not necessary. But somebody right now is, I can guarantee it, building a project with drone staging as part of it. Somebody is building one that has no parking requirement in a town somewhere, right? So it's just understanding that change is happening. And yes, we're extremely slow to adapt as an industry, widespread.
Right.
But I think unless we start talking about these things that, okay, this could be reality. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. But if we're not working it into our projects in the way we're looking at deals, just starting to, then I think it's a missed opportunity.
For sure.
So lots of creative conversations, and I think they're important to keep having.
For sure.
All right, give me your number 2.
My number 2 is flexibility. We had a lot of retailers come to our booth and say, I know you have nothing available now. How about 26, 27? And we were like, potentially. And they're like, we'll sign a lease today to take the space in 2027. There were a lot of talks of spacing in a shopping center where, don't say no for us. Where it used to be like, if it wasn't in this, nice box that we have tied up with a nice pretty bow, we would move on to the next. Well, now there is no next with the limited supply, and retailers have gotten, the pendulum has shifted, and retailers have gotten a lot more flexible. It's leading to more creative deals, and the continued flexibility in how to get a store open is super refreshing. And I think that's going to be a catalyst in deal flow coming into 2025 and 2026, is this more flexibility from a retailer, whether that's on space size, whether that's on space location, whether that's on deal terms. Retailers generally are getting more flexible.
Do you think if retail construction picks up, maybe costs come down miraculously, I don't know, maybe interest rates continue to come down, do you think that changes the focus on flexibility? So the question is this because the retail model is becoming more flexible, or is it just that the retailers don't have a choice? Maybe they don't want to be flexible, but if they're not, they can't open stores in this climate. So do you think that stays or not?
I think this will come down to, as it always does, store level performance. And if being flexible gives them the ability to get the performance they wanted or perhaps better, then they'll stay flexible. If the flexibility is attributed to a bad store performance, then they'll cut back on flexibility.
Okay. So maybe not exclusively tied to availability of space.
I don't think so.
Just store performance.
Not just, but you said exclusively. I don't think it's exclusive, but I think store performance is a driver of this, in my opinion. And you know, if I saw a clip the other day, it was I wrestled my whole life. I wrestled in college. It was a wrestling coach talking to his team, and the clip was his least favorite phrase is build confidence. He's like, I don't think you build confidence, you earn confidence. And we believe that if you prepare, that's what builds confidence. Yet you can prepare all you want, but for, let's say, a big game, you're still nervous. He gave an example of and I'm going to land this plane, I promise. And he gave an example of if you're standing, you know, your friends and you go to like some river and you're standing off a cliff and you're like standing at the front and you're like 1, 2, and then you're like, no, you go first. And because you're nervous. What gives you the confidence is, well, if you actually jump in, when you land in the water, what do you say? You're like, wow, that was awesome. Let's do it again. So I think what builds the confidence to be flexible is to try. And if retailers are flexible and it leads to wins, which I think it is doing already, then they will continue to be flexible. And I think it's not exclusive to performance, but I think it's attributed to that level of performance, probably even more than just the availability of space. I think the performance matters. And, you know, this is a refreshing time. The fact that more and more retailers are being flexible, if they continue to try and execute, then I think that bodes well for the industry on overall flexibility.
Your wrestling coach would be so proud. He worked his teaching.
That wasn't his. That was just some random one I saw on Instagram.
He doesn't even get credit.
It was just some random one on Instagram I saw the other day.
Well, I love that we could work inspirational wrestling messages.
Yeah, so you don't build confidence, you earn confidence. There you go.
That's actually a great quote. I might use that. Love it. And I think you're exactly right. And that was such an interesting point, that it's not just, okay, we're opening stores like this because we have to, but if they work, then why not keep doing it that way?
That's the types of things that leads to new prototypes, that leads to new the types of markets, right? You have to try them to see if they work. That leads to new product types that they go into, right? How does a mall retailer get confident that they can do off-mall stores? Well, they open off-mall stores.
See how they perform.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the only way. You could put all the data you want together, but until you actually try it, you're not going to have the confidence that you can roll out off-mall stores if you're an enclosed mall tenant.
I could see there being a correlation versus causation question, right, in the
Sure.
data, because if they're opening a new format and in a new market or with a new product mix, like how many changes they make, it could be a little difficult to trace it, but
Sure.
I think the point is valid.
Cool.
Nice. All right, my last and final one is an interesting shift in markets in focus for both investment and new development. We were both at actually a retail stat event, which was very interesting. Actually, you were speaking. Great job. Side
Thank you.
note. But one of the other speakers was talking about the growth in grocery, single tenant and inline across the country. And the number one market for grocery growth coming up is the New York tri-state, New York, New Jersey, Long Island, and Eastern PA. And I thought that was incredible. And that's across the top 10 grocery banners and then also some of the smaller specialty grocers. So across the board. And what I thought was so interesting in that is we've been talking really ad nauseum about growth in Florida, Texas, Arizona for several years now, really post-pandemic. And to see that not only the investor sentiment, which I can touch on personally in my meetings, but the retailer sentiment being a focus on the Northeast and also California, I thought that was a shift and very interesting that perhaps the population migration is stabilized or there's still opportunity in sort of infill locations in very dense areas. So to me, that was a big change, and I was very happy to see it.
So I think in any investment, in any market, right, if you can clearly see growth happening in a market and you can get in here and capture the growth, it's quite compelling, right? And so everyone's looking for, in any industry, looks for growth markets. That said, when you look at just density,
exactly,
income, the vast majority of the markets that have this unbelievable density, unbelievable amounts of wealth are slower growth than some of these other places. So that doesn't mean you can't capture great returns in those markets. It might not be as easy to get this tailwind of growth that you had in some of these other markets. But if that growth subsides, it makes some of those other markets a lot more, interesting.
We've had investors, developers specifically really try to pull out of the Northeast because it's so difficult to build here, right? The barriers to entry are so high. The land costs are high. Everything, the approval process is harder. And now I've seen that maybe the easier money in some of the other markets is not as easy. So they're coming back to the Northeast and saying, okay, our tenants want to be here. We got to figure this out. Our investors want to put their money in a market they know in a lot of cases. So it seems to be a focus back on the Northeast despite some of the challenges in investment, which is great being that we're here.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. All right. What's your last and final point?
My number one was just the amount of mature retailers that have their pedal to the metal on expansion, right? I think this is all the mature retailers, Walmarts and Home Depots and Targets all have domestic expansion on their mind and have a plan to expand domestically, probably over the next 5 years, as we talked about.
The 5-year plan.
Right. But the amount of, for the past few years, we've been talking about like the hot new retailers trying to capitalize on changing market conditions and this and that. While a lot of mature retailers have been focused on what I would call retooling the store, efficiency in business, their technology stack, all this stuff, and growing margin and share that way. And now they've got these unbelievable machines and they see opportunity in the marketplace to grow from an expansion perspective, and they're all for it and they're doing it.
And that's great from a landlord investor perspective too, because those are known quantities, right? I just think it helps the stability of our industry. We both love small business. We love growth. We love interesting deal stories. But there's something about a national brand wanting to come into a space that's proven, that that has good credit. It's nice.
Yeah, I think there's always been there's always national brands that are expanding, but the brands that were, we opened a Macy's in Chicago a month ago. And so this is a brand that's been around for decades and decades and decades, that their real tear of growth happened, a long time ago. For them to be continuing to evolve and do that, the Walmarts of the world, there's thousands already of Walmarts in America, and the fact that they believe there's more opportunity for them, it speaks to retail in America, how strong it is. It speaks to the unbelievable job these companies have done. But there's always been, whether over the past few years it was Five Below and Ulta, these were growth companies, national brands, but growth companies, and these legacy mature retailers weren't put in that bucket, even though they were still wildly successful. The fact that they're also in the mix of expansion with the hot new concepts, with the ones that have been expanding like crazy over the last 10 years, I think this is really interesting.
And I wonder if that will lead to increased development activity too, because some of those are pretty large footprints. I heard Costco was expanding pretty aggressively in 25, and that's not something you can just kind of squeeze in to an existing space, right? Those are big projects. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as a tangential to this, we see increased retail development as well. Ground up. No? Yes? I know we just talked about flexibility, but I think for some of the national retailers, that's harder than some of the smaller stores.
I think that brand new development is still super challenged. And I think a lot of markets are very tight. And even some of the tertiary markets are tighter than people think, and supply is limited because the trade area is smaller. Like where the retail nexus is a much smaller geographic area. So there might be land somewhere else, but if you go there, you're off the mark.
Right.
So where the land actually is super tight. So those tertiary and secondary markets are in the same boat where supply is limited. And even though there might be just cornfields, where the cornfields aren't the retail nexus, and it's probably not a great location. So again, I don't know how available that land is because it's really not what we would consider retail land. And so I am uncertain how much we're going to develop. I think there'll be some, but
maybe it's just the big box retailers, right? The ones that need very significant footprints that have no choice.
But again,
maybe they scale down. But
even still, where that goes, right? A lot. Where does that go? A lot. It goes like, we have this building here. This building doesn't work. We're going to tear that down and build. Is that net new supply? I don't really think that's net new supply.
That would be redevelopment,
right?
In your mind.
Yeah.
To me, if you're scraping it and starting over, that's still ground up.
It's technically ground up, but from a supply perspective, we haven't added new supply.
Yeah.
We just repurposed existing supply.
Right. Or added to it marginally if you're maybe doing an assemblage,
right,
nearby lots, things like that.
I think the raw land and building on that, it's tough.
Yeah. All right. So maybe a mix of what we were both saying.
Maybe.
I think ground up, but more scraping sites, like you just said, and maybe adding some additional.
We'll see.
We'll see. It's going to be a good year. I'm glad the conference was successful for you.
Same.
It was a good week for sure, and great to see you there.
You too.
To everyone listening, that was What's in Store with Karly and Chris. Thanks for tuning in to listen to our top takeaways from ICSC New York. We appreciate you tuning in and look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a great day, everyone.